I haven't eaten in 3 days. The words were so small they almost disappeared into the wind, but they were enough to make Sergeant William Carter stop in the middle of the ruined street. April, 1945. Eastern Germany. Spring had arrived, but nothing here looked alive. The town of Falkenau sat under a pale gray sky, its streets covered in dust and broken brick, its windows hollow and empty like eyes that had stopped looking for tomorrow. Rain from the night before had dried into thin streaks of mud across the cobblestones, and the smell of wet ash still hung in the air. William stepped out of the jeep slowly, his boots pressing into the dirt with a sound sharper than it should have been in all that silence. He had seen towns like this before. Too many of them. Burned roofs. Fallen walls. Chimneys standing alone like gravestones. But this was different. Not because of the destruction. Because of the boy. Lucas Weber was kneeling in front of what had once been a bakery. 12 years old? White blonde hair darkened by dust. A coat too thin for the cold morning air. His hands were buried in the rubble, moving brick by brick, searching for something invisible. At first William thought the boy might be looking for family photographs. Or tools. Or anything worth saving. But when Lucas opened his hand, there was nothing there but flour. Old flour. Gray from dirt and rain. Barely enough to cover his palm. William stared at it. The boy stared at it too, like it was treasure. A quarter-mile away, an army truck rattled through the square, its engine breaking the quiet for a moment before disappearing down another road. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang once. Then stopped. William took off his gloves. The air felt colder than it looked. "What's he doing?" asked Private Eddie Miller from beside the jeep. Eddie was 19. Young enough to still be surprised by hunger. William didn't answer right away. He watched the boy press the flour into a small tin cup, brushing dirt away with fingers so thin they looked brittle. The boy's breathing was shallow. Slow. Like even air cost energy now. William knew that look. Oklahoma, 1934. Dust Bowl. He had seen grown men look like that when the wheat failed. Hunger had a shape. It hollowed the face first. Then the eyes. Lucas looked up suddenly. Blue eyes. Pale and sharp beneath all the dirt. For 1 second, the boy froze. American uniform. American boots. American rifle. Everything he had been taught to fear. William saw it happen in his face, the instinct to run, fighting against legs too weak to move. Then Lucas spoke, his voice cracked and barely above a whisper. "I haven't eaten in days." The English was broken. Heavy. But clear enough. William felt something tighten in his chest. Around them, the town remained still. No birds. No voices. Just wind moving through broken windows like breath through empty lungs. Lucas lowered his eyes, ashamed of the words the second they left his mouth. Hunger had stripped away pride, but not all of it. William looked at the bakery ruins again. The sign above the doorway, half broken, still read Weber brought in faded paint. Bread. That was what the boy had been digging for. Not money. Not memories. Bread. Or the ghost of it. And in that moment, standing in the cold dust of a defeated country, William Carter understood something war never taught in training. Hunger didn't wear a uniform. William did not reach for his rifle. He reached for his pack. Slow. Careful. The boy watched every movement, his shoulders tightening, his body bracing for something harsh because harshness was what war had taught him to expect. William crouched until he was eye level with him, boots settling into the dust, knees cracking from too many miles on too little sleep. He opened the canvas flap of his field bag and pulled out half a loaf of army bread, wrapped in wax paper, still soft from the morning supply truck. The smell escaped first. Warm yeast. Salt. Real bread. Lucas stared at it like it was something impossible. His throat moved, but no words came. William broke off a piece and put it in his own mouth. He chewed slowly. Swallowed. Then held the rest out. No tricks. No orders. Just bread. Lucas did not move. His eyes stayed fixed on William's hand, on the pale crust, on the steam still trapped inside the loaf. Behind William, Eddie shifted his weight beside the jeep. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "we have civilians lining up at the depot already." William knew what that meant. Supplies were counted. Every ounce mattered. But he kept his hand out. The wind moved through the street, lifting dust into little spirals around their boots. Somewhere nearby, loose glass tapped softly against a broken frame. Lucas looked over his shoulder. William followed his eyes. There was no one there. No family. No sister waiting behind a wall. No mother watching from a doorway. Just empty streets and hollow houses. Slowly, Lucas reached forward. His fingers trembled so badly the bread nearly slipped from his hand. He held it against his chest first, like protecting it mattered more than eating it. Then he took a bite. Small. Careful. The crust cracked softly between his teeth. He froze. His eyes closed. William watched the change happen all at once. The body remembering food. The mouth remembering warmth. Lucas swallowed too fast and coughed, pressing his hand against his lips. William unscrewed his canteen and handed it over. Lucas drank, water running down his chin because his hands could not keep steady. "Easy," William said, even though he knew the boy probably understood only half of it. Lucas nodded anyway. Another bite. Bigger this time. Faster. William noticed something strange then. After the third bite, Lucas stopped. He looked at the bread. Turned it over in his hand. Then carefully tore off a piece and slipped it into his coat pocket. William frowned. "Save it for later?" he asked. Lucas looked away. Did not answer. William stood, dusting his hands. He glanced up at the bakery sign again. Weber bread. A family business once. A life before all this. Eddie stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What now?" William looked at the boy sitting in the rubble, chewing like every bite was a fight against time itself. The square felt smaller now. Quieter. Like the whole town was holding its breath. William looked at the half-collapsed doorway behind Lucas and noticed something else. Tiny footprints in the dust. Smaller than his. Fresh. He turned back to the boy. "Are you alone?" Lucas stopped chewing. For the first time, fear crossed his face faster than hunger. He pressed his hand against the piece hidden in his pocket. And William understood. That bread was never meant for him alone. Lucas did not answer. He just sat there in the dust, his hand pressed against the bread hidden inside his coat like it was the last valuable thing left in the world. William looked at the smaller footprints again. Not old. Not washed out by rain. Fresh enough that the edges still held shape in the dirt. Small shoes. Child-sized. William lowered himself back down, resting on one knee so his shadow would not fall over the boy. "Is someone with you?" he asked, slower this time. Lucas stared at the ground. His jaw tightened. The silence stretched between them, thin and fragile like paper. William had seen that kind of silence before. Not defiance. Protection. Eddie leaned closer, glancing toward the broken doorway of the bakery. "Could be nobody," he said. "Kid could be saving it for tomorrow." But William shook his head. Hunger did not save for tomorrow. Hunger ate now. That was how he knew. Lucas finally lifted his eyes. They were wet, but not crying. Just tired. Older than 12. He spoke softly, in broken English. "My sister." William glanced at Eddie. "Where?" Lucas looked toward the collapsed cellar entrance beneath the bakery floor. Half covered by brick and timber. Dark inside. Cold-looking even in daylight. William stood and stepped carefully over broken stone, boots scraping against loose brick. The smell changed near the opening. Less ash. More damp earth. Old flour. Mold. The kind of smell that stayed in places where people had hidden too long. He stopped at the edge. "Hello?" he called, his voice low. Nothing. Just a drip of water somewhere underground. Lucas moved fast then, grabbing William's sleeve with surprising force. "No loud," he said. "She gets scared." William looked down at the boy's hand gripping his jacket. Small. Cold. Shaking. He nodded. Then crouched by the opening and waited. 30 seconds. Maybe more. Then movement. Tiny movement in the dark. A pair of eyes appeared first. Wide. Gray-blue. Watching. Then a face. A little girl, maybe 7 years old. Thin as wire. Hair tangled. Dirt. Across her cheeks like war paint. She stared at the American uniform and froze. William did not move. He understood fear when he saw it. Lucas reached into his coat and pulled out the piece of bread he had hidden. Held it out to her. The girl climbed slowly from the cellar barefoot, her feet black with dust and ash. She took the bread with both hands like it was something sacred. William looked around the ruined bakery again. 2 children. Alone. Sleeping underground. Eating scraps of flour from broken walls. The thoughts sat heavy in his chest. "What is her name?" William asked. Lucas swallowed. "Anna." Anna ate in silence. Small bites. Tiny bites. Like she had learned to make food last longer by pretending hunger could wait. Eddie looked away toward the street, uncomfortable now. The war had ended on paper in places like this, but paper did not feed children. William opened his field bag again. 1 can of soup. 1 apple. 2 hard biscuits. His dinner. He placed them on a broken wooden crate beside the children. Lucas stared at the food, then at William. Confused. Suspicious. "Why?" Lucas asked. Just 1 word. William looked at the bakery sign hanging crooked above them, at the name Weber, fading under dust and rain. Then he looked back at the boy and said the only truth that made sense. "Because somebody should have come sooner." William stayed only a few more minutes. Long enough to watch Anna finish the bread. Long enough to see Lucas divide the apple in half without being asked, giving the larger piece to his sister. That told William everything he needed to know about the boy. Hunger had not taken the best part of him. Not yet. The noon sun had climbed higher now, pale behind thin clouds, warming the broken rooftops and wet stone. Somewhere beyond the square, engines hummed and voices carried from the temporary American supply station near the old train yard. Orders. Movement. Life rebuilding itself inch by inch. William stood and adjusted the strap of his pack. Lighter now. Almost empty. Eddie checked his watch. "Supply line closes in 40 minutes, he said. William nodded, but his eyes stayed on the children. Anna sat on an overturned flour barrel. Both hands wrapped around the soup can like it was a stove. Lucas stood beside her, protective without trying to look it. William noticed the boy's posture now. Shoulders forward. Eyes always scanning. 12 years old, carrying the weight of a father. "Stay here," William said. Lucas frowned. "You come back?" The question came fast, almost accidental, like the boy hated needing the answer. William looked at him for a second. He thought about promises. War had made promises cheap. But this one felt different. "Yes," he said. Simple. Firm. Lucas studied his face like measuring truth. Then nodded once. William and Eddie walked back through the square toward the jeep. Their boots stirred dust into the afternoon light. Halfway there, Eddie stopped. "You cannot save every hungry kid in Germany, Sergeant." William looked at the road ahead. A horse cart rolled slowly past, loaded with blankets and pots. Civilians moving what little they had left. "I know," William said. Eddie kicked a loose stone. "Then why them?" William did not answer right away. He thought of Oklahoma. Dry fields. Empty cupboards. His mother cutting one loaf of bread into 6 equal pieces, making hunger feel fair even when it was not enough. He remembered her words. Nobody should go hungry while somebody else can help. He climbed into the jeep. The engine turned over with a rough cough. At the supply station, the line was already long. Mothers. Old men. Children holding metal bowls. The smell of boiled potatoes drifted through the air. Thin soup. Better than nothing. William walked straight to the field kitchen where steam rose from iron pots. The cook, a broad man from Kansas named Frank Doyle, looked up. "You missed lunch." William placed his empty bag on the table. "Need food?" Frank raised an eyebrow. "For who?" William glanced back at the line of civilians. "2 kids." Frank scraped the bottom of a pot with his ladle. "That makes 50 today." William reached into his pocket and pulled out his cigarette ration. Unopened. "4 packs." Frank looked at them, then at William. "Fair trade." He pushed over a loaf of bread, 2 cans of vegetable soup, dried beans, and a jar of strawberry jam. "Rare." "Precious." William stared at the jam. Sugar. Sweetness. Something children remembered. He packed it carefully. As he turned to leave, Captain Robert Hayes stepped into his path. Tall. Clean uniform. Sharp eyes. He looked at the bag, then at William. "Who authorized extra rations?" William stopped. The kitchen noise seemed quieter suddenly. The steam. The spoons. The waiting. William tightened his grip on the bag and answered plainly. "No one, sir." Captain Hayes looked at him for a long second. Then at the bread inside the bag. "That is what worries me." Captain Robert Hayes stood in the doorway of the field kitchen with his hands behind his back, his face unreadable in the afternoon light. Steam rolled past him from the soup kettles, carrying the smell of onion, salt, and boiled potatoes into the cold spring air. William held the ration bag in one hand and said nothing. Around them, spoons scraped metal bowls. Boots moved across packed dirt. Nobody looked up, but everybody listened. Hayes stepped closer and glanced inside the bag. Bread. Soup. Beans. Jam. More than a soldier would normally carry for himself. 2 kids? Hayes asked. William nodded. A boy and his sister. Hayes looked at him for a moment. Parents? William shook his head. Gone, I think. Hayes exhaled through his nose, slow. Tired. The kind of tired that had nothing to do with sleep. He looked past William at the line of civilians waiting for food. Old women clutching cups. Boys no older than Lucas staring at the soup line with hollow eyes. Germany was full of children like that now. Too many. You know the rules, Hayes said. William nodded again. He did know. Supplies went through channels. No personal distribution. No exceptions. War loved order because hunger did not. But Hayes did not reach for the bag. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in paper. Another biscuit. Hard, square, plain. He dropped it into William's bag. Make it count, he said. Then he turned and walked away. Eddie let out a breath he had been holding. That was close. William adjusted the bag over his shoulder. Not close enough. The jeep bounced over broken roads as they made their way back across town. Tires cracked over loose brick and shattered glass. The afternoon had softened into that strange quiet that came after rain and before dark. Smoke still rose in thin lines from chimneys where people were trying to cook whatever they could find. William held the ration bag on his lap the whole ride, steadying the jars and cans with both hands like fragile cargo. When they reached the bakery, the square looked empty at first. William's chest tightened. Then Lucas stepped out from behind the broken doorway, fast, eyes wide, like he had been waiting the whole time. Anna followed, wrapped in a blanket too thin for the wind. Her face looked different now. Still pale. But less afraid. William climbed out carrying the bag. Lucas stared at it. At the bread. At the soup. At the jar of jam catching light like red glass. For us? Lucas asked. William nodded. Anna stepped closer, eyes fixed on the jar. What is it? She asked in German. Lucas translated softly. William unscrewed the lid and the smell of strawberries drifted into the cold air. Sweet. Bright. Alive. Anna blinked at it like she had forgotten sweetness existed. William handed her the spoon. She dipped it once. Just a little. Tasted it. Then stopped moving. William saw her eyes fill, not with tears exactly, but with memory. Something before the war. Before cellars and dust and empty stomachs. Lucas looked at his sister and smiled for the first time. Small. Quick. Gone in a second. But real. William opened the soup cans with his pocket knife while Eddie gathered broken wood and lit a small fire in an iron pan near the bakery wall. The flame caught slowly, then stronger. Heat rose. Soup warmed. The smell filled the square. And for the first time in a long time, the ruined bakery smelled like food again. But as William stirred the soup, he noticed Lucas was watching the fire differently. Not like someone hungry. Like someone remembering how it used to burn. The soup began to simmer in the iron pan, small bubbles rising through the thick broth, carrying the smell of carrots, onions, and beans into the cold evening air. Smoke curled upward through the broken roof beams of the bakery, drifting into the gray sky like a memory trying to escape. Anna sat close to the fire, both hands stretched toward the warmth, her eyes fixed on the pot like looking away might make it disappear. Lucas stood beside William, silent, staring at the flames. Not hungry now. Thinking. William stirred the soup with a wooden spoon he had found in the rubble, blackened at the handle but still strong. You know this place, William said quietly. Lucas nodded. His eyes stayed on the fire. My father baked here. William glanced around. Broken shelves. Fallen brick. A flour scale half buried near the wall. Burned trays stacked crooked in the corner. Even ruined, it still looked like a bakery. You helped him? William asked. Lucas hesitated, then nodded again. Every morning. His English came easier now. Not because the words were easier, but because the fear was less. He pointed toward the back wall. Oven there. William looked. Behind the fallen stones, he could see the curved brick mouth of an old bread oven. Covered in dust, but still standing. Eddie noticed it too. Looks intact. Lucas stepped closer to it, kneeling beside the bricks. His fingers brushed the stone like touching something sacred. Before school, he said. My father wake at 4. Always 4. Mix flour. Water. Salt. He paused, looking at his hands. I help knead. William watched him. The boy's hands were small, cracked from cold, dirty from rubble. But the way he moved them while speaking told the truth. Muscle memory. Habit. Work learned young. Anna shifted by the fire and spoke softly in German. Lucas answered, then looked at William. She says it smells like before? William looked at the soup, then at the broken walls around them. Food changed a place. Even ruins. Especially ruins. Eddie handed out tin cups. William poured the soup carefully, making sure Anna's cup was full. She held it with both hands, the steam warming her face before the first sip. Lucas waited until she drank first. Again, William noticed. Always her first. The boy carried responsibility like it had become part of his bones. They ate slowly. The soup was simple. Thin. But hot. The kind of heat that reached the stomach and spread outward, reminding the body what safety felt like. Darkness began settling over the town. Shadows stretched long through the square. Somewhere in the distance, an American truck horn sounded twice. Curfew would come soon. William looked at the cellar opening where the children had been sleeping. Damp stone. Cold dirt. No blankets except one. No rail safety. He knew they could not stay there much longer. But before he could speak, Lucas stood and walked to the old oven. He brushed more dust away from the stone opening, exposing the iron handle beneath. It still works, he said. William frowned. How do you know? Lucas looked at the brick walls, the shape of the vent, the way the soot still clung to the inside. My father built it. Brick by brick. He placed his hand on the oven door. Heat stays here. William stared at the oven, then at the boy. An idea began forming. Small at first. Quiet. Like the first spark in dry wood. A field kitchen needed bakers. Refugees needed bread. And standing in the ruins of a dead bakery, William realized Lucas was not just surviving here. He was standing in the one place where he still knew how to live. Morning came cold and pale over Fauconau. A thin fog hung between the broken buildings, turning the town into shapes and shadows. The fire outside the bakery had burned down to ash, leaving only a faint line of warmth in the stones. William had slept little. His army blanket lay folded in the jeep, untouched. All night he kept seeing the oven, the brick mouth, the iron door, the way Lucas had touched it like it still belonged to his father. At sunrise, William walked back into the bakery ruins carrying a canvas sack over his shoulder. Flour. Real flour. 10 pounds from the field kitchen. Behind him, Eddie carried a small can of cooking oil and a bag of salt. Lucas was already awake, sweeping dust from the bakery floor with an old broom made from tied branches. Anna sat near the wall wrapped in the blanket, watching her brother work. William dropped the sack beside the old wooden table, the legs uneven but standing. Lucas looked at it. Then at William. "What is this?" William untied the top and folded it back. White flour. Clean. Dry. The smell hit the room immediately. Lucas stepped closer like he could not trust his eyes. His fingers touched the edge of the sack carefully. "For bread," William said. Lucas looked up fast. "For us?" William shook his head. "For everybody." The boy stared at him, trying to understand. William pointed toward the old oven. "Can it work?" Lucas looked at the oven, then the flour, then back at William. Something changed in his face. Not hope exactly. Purpose. He moved fast after that. Clearing stones. Checking the vents. Brushing soot from the iron door. Eddie helped lift fallen timber while William brought water from the jeep. Anna sat on an overturned crate, her eyes following every movement like she was watching something impossible happen. Lucas worked like he had done it 100 times. Testing the bricks. Listening to the hollow spaces. Checking the draft. At 12 years old, his hands moved with the confidence of memory. "We need dry wood," he said. William nodded. Eddie whistled softly. "Kid knows his business." Within an hour, they had a fire burning inside the oven. Small at first. Then stronger. Heat spread through the bricks, warming the bakery walls for the first time in months. Lucas stood in front of the mixing table, sleeves rolled up, hands in the flour. Water. Salt. Oil. He mixed slowly, carefully, just as his father had taught him. William watched the boy's face while he worked. The hunger was still there. The loss too. But underneath it was something steadier now. Skill. Identity. The dough stuck to Lucas's fingers. He folded it. Pressed it. Turned it. Again and again. Anna smiled for the first time that morning. "He looks like Papa," she whispered in German. Lucas heard it, and stopped for half a second. Just half. Then kept kneading. The room filled with the smell of flour and warm brick. Familiar smells. Human smells. Outside, word spread fast. Refugees passed by the square and slowed down. An old woman stopped at the doorway. Then another man. Then 2 children. They stood there quietly, watching smoke rise from the bakery chimney for the first time since the war had swallowed the town. William stepped outside and looked at the line forming. Not for soup. Not for orders. For bread. And when he turned back inside, he saw Lucas place the first shaped loaf onto the baking tray with both hands, careful and steady, like carrying something more fragile than food. It was the first thing the boy had built since losing everything. And for the first time, William realized he had not just fed the children. He had given them a reason to stay alive. The smell of fresh bread spread through Fauconau before the first loaf was even done. Warm yeast. Hot flour. Smoke and salt. It moved through the broken streets like news. By noon, nearly 20 people stood outside the bakery ruins, waiting in silence. Old men with empty sacks. Mothers holding children by the hand. Faces pale from hunger, eyes fixed on the oven like it was a miracle they were afraid to believe in. Inside, Lucas worked beside the table, sweat on his forehead despite the cool spring air. The heat from the oven had turned the ruined bakery warm for the first time in months. His hands moved fast now, stronger than yesterday, pressing dough, shaping loaves, laying them onto trays with careful spacing. William carried wood to keep the fire alive. Eddie poured water into buckets and handed cups to those waiting outside. Anna sat by the doorway counting loaves under her breath, her small voice almost lost beneath the crackling fire. For a few hours, the war felt far away. Not gone. Just farther. Then boots sounded in the street. Heavy. Ordered. William looked up. Captain Robert Hayes stepped into the bakery doorway, his uniform sharp against the dust and ruin. 2 military police stood behind him. He looked at the oven. The flour. The line of civilians outside. Then at William. "Step outside, Sergeant." The room went still. Lucas stopped kneading. Flour clung to his hands. Anna lowered her eyes. William wiped his palms on his jacket and walked into the square. The line of civilians shifted back, nervous now. Hayes stood with his hands behind his back, staring at the smoke rising from the bakery chimney. "Do you understand what this looks like?" Hayes asked. William nodded. "Yes, sir." Hayes turned toward him. "Unauthorized use of military rations. Use of occupied civilian property. Organizing distribution without command approval." William said nothing. The words were not wrong. Hayes glanced at the people waiting. A little girl held an empty tin cup in both hands. An old woman leaned on a cane, too weak to stand straight. "And yet," Hayes said, "there they are." William looked at the line. "They are hungry." Hayes looked back at him sharply. "Everybody is hungry." The wind moved through the square, carrying the smell of baking bread between them. William thought of Lucas inside, hands in dough, rebuilding something no army could issue. He answered quietly. "He knows how to make bread. They know how to eat it. That seems useful." Hayes stared at him for a long moment. The kind of silence that could turn either way. Then Lucas stepped into the doorway behind William, flour on his face, shoulders straight. He held the first finished loaf in both hands. Golden brown. Steam rising from the cracked top. Real bread. The whole square seemed to stop breathing. Hayes looked at the loaf. Then at the boy. "Who taught you?" he asked. Lucas swallowed. "My father." Hayes nodded once. Slow. He stepped closer and tore off a piece from the edge. Hot enough to sting his fingers. He ate it. Chewed. The crust cracked softly in the quiet square. He looked at William. Then at the waiting civilians. Finally, he turned to the military police. "Make a note," he said. "Temporary civilian food station. Authorized." William blinked. Eddie let out a breath. Lucas looked down at the bread in his hands, like he could not believe it had just saved them all. Hayes adjusted his gloves and looked at William one last time. "Do not make me regret this, Sergeant." Then he walked away. And behind him, for the first time in months, the people of Falkenau stepped forward not toward orders or fear, but toward bread. By the end of the week, the bakery was no longer a ruin. Not fully. The walls were still cracked. The windows were still empty holes covered with cloth and wood. The roof still leaked when it rained. But every morning before sunrise, smoke rose from the chimney again. Warm. Steady. Alive. The people of Falkenau began measuring time by it. When the smoke rose, there would be bread. Lucas woke at 4 every morning, just as his father once had. The habit returned faster than hunger left. He mixed flour in silence while the town still slept. Water. Salt. Yeast when they could find it. Sometimes potato flour when supplies ran thin. His hands grew stronger each day. The shaking stopped. Color returned to his face. Anna helped too, carrying water in small buckets, stacking wood beside the oven, brushing flour from the tables with serious little hands. She laughed more now. Quiet at first. Then real. William visited every morning before reporting to base. Sometimes bringing flour. Sometimes sugar. Once coffee. He never stayed long. Just enough to check the fire, taste the first loaf, and make sure the children were warm. Captain Hayes kept his word. Official ration deliveries began 3 days later. Not much. 50 pounds of flour a week. Beans. Dried milk. Enough to keep the bakery alive. Enough to feed the square. Refugees passing through Fauquenau began stopping there before moving on. Bread became currency. Hope became visible. In June, the town council reopened in the old schoolhouse. Their first meeting was held over warm bread from Lucas's oven. In July, a carpenter repaired the bakery door. In August, someone painted the broken sign above the entrance. Weber bread. Fresh white letters over old wood. William stood across the street the day they hung it back up. Lucas saw him, and waved flour-covered hands from the doorway. 12 years old? Taller now. Stronger. Looking like a boy again instead of a survivor. Orders came in September. William's unit was going home. Oklahoma. The war was ending for him in a way it had not for Fauquenau. On his last morning, he walked to the bakery before sunrise. The air smelled like rain and warm bread. Lucas was at the table kneading dough. Anna sat on a stool swinging her feet, eating jam on toast. William placed something on the counter. His army field knife. The same one he used to open their first soup cans. Lucas looked at it. For me? William nodded. For the bakery. Lucas ran his fingers over the handle, worn smooth from years of use. He looked up. You came back. William smiled once. Small. Honest. I said I would. Anna stepped down from her stool and handed William a wrapped loaf, still warm in paper. For the road? She said in careful English. William took it, feeling the heat through the paper. Bread from the hands of the boy he had once found digging for flour in dust. Outside, the Jeep engine started. Eddie called for him. Time to go. William turned at the bakery door and looked back one last time. Fire in the oven. Flour in the air. Children alive. A town eating again. Years later, long after the uniform was folded away and the war became memory, a package arrived at William Carter's farm in Oklahoma. Inside was a single loaf of bread and a note written in careful English. We are still baking. Thank you for the first bread. William sat on his porch holding that loaf while the evening sun dropped behind the fields, and for a long time he said nothing. Because sometimes the smallest thing a person gives is the thing another person builds a life from.